Namaste, everybody. My name is Susan MacQuarrie, and this is the Awakened Heart radio program. When we first called it the Awakened Heart, we realized that it actually is an acronym for the Ah. So I like to start out each program where we really just get grounded, grounded in our heart space so that we can really connect and really share this time together in a more meaningful way. So if we can all just take a really deep breath. I want you to take it in through your nose and all the way down into your belly. And just, let your belly stick out a little bit. Really draw the air all the way down. And then when we release it, we'll do it with an ah. And that's how we just kind of let go of all the busyness of the day, any anxiety, any of that mind chatter, that's going to get in the way of us connecting. So let's all take a really deep breath together. Through the nose all the way down. And then as you release, let's do a big ah. And as you do that, just feel that busyness and that any negativity, any chatter, just releasing through your breath. Let's do that again together. A deep breath down into the belly. And then let it out with a big ah. Awesome. Doesn't that feel good? That's a really good practice to do. If you're in the car, someone cuts you off, and you're feeling not so positive, it's a really good, opportunity to just take a really deep breath in and make an effort to just release that. And, as I said, it allows us to be more in our heart space, which is really where we want to be these days. We're entering the golden age, which it's a time when those of us who are on the spiritual path really need to start sharing with each other, connecting, because it's a time of great change for all of us, as we're trying to really tap into that path that we're here for. We're feeling all this change, and change is a little bit anxiety provoking. So it's awesome for us to do programs like this where we can learn from each other and start to connect. Finding what your path is can be a bit of a challenge. We all talk about that with each other a lot. And it's a bit of a challenge to feel confident that you've heard that voice or you've gotten that calling clear. And the other thing that can be a bit of a challenge is to really tap into what your purpose is here. Not just for yourself, but for everybody else. Because I think we all have some kind of spiritual purpose where, we're assisting people in some way, we're serving people in some way. And the interesting thing is that so many of us struggle to figure out what that is. We really can get uptight and struggle with that whole process of trying to hear spirit talking to us. It'd be nice if we could get like an express envelope, with a letter inside that wrote out our path for us and gave us directions, but it just doesn't work that way. I've got a guest here today who I think has done a really good job with listening to that voice and not only hearing it, but then implementing, what she's gotten so that she's actually serving people through her spiritual path. She's a good friend and an awesome spiritual being, and she's done some amazing things. She's written a book called The 7-Course Meal for the Soul. She's also created an amazing business here in Las Vegas. It's called The Art of Attunement, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later, but she works with people's brain waves in an effort to get them more balanced. And lastly, she's a Diksha giver like myself, and also a oneness trainer at for Oneness University in India, which we talked about a little bit at the last show. I call her a happy specialist because she's really focused on helping people be happier. So I am introducing Angi Covington. Welcome to the show, Angi.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I'm so glad to be here.
So tell us a little bit about why I, having gotten to know you a little bit, would see you as a happy specialist.
Well, I think that was the key. I came from a corporate background before I became aware of my spiritual path. And so as I was exploring all of this, it became very clear to me that a lot of the things that I was learning could benefit me, but also people who were like me, especially in the corporate world. And rather than use terminology that's probably a little more common in the spiritual world, I'm trying to simplify it or make it a little bit more corporate. And happy is really just what we're all seeking. It's the one thing that we all have in common, and we are all looking to find that happiness. So
absolutely. What do you think it means to be happy?
Well, what I use the term in my book to describe is the happiness that sustains. Some people refer to that as joy or bliss. For us, happiness is really the key, and it's something that, again, that sustains without any impact on what's going on in the outside world. However, pleasure seems to be what most of us were a little bit confused. So. Yeah. We self-medicate, I think, with pleasure.
Absolutely. No, I couldn't agree more. I mean, there's so many ways that we do that. So your book kind of talks about happy. And one of the things I really liked about your book is, having been on the path myself for, I guess, about 20 years, I hate to say that out loud, I have probably read hundreds of books. And they all have these, sometimes really complicated, practices and things that are very time consuming. And it just seems like you could never stop. Like there's always another book, another practice, something else to occupy more your mind really than our heart, which is really what we want to be doing. I thought your book was really different. Can you talk a little bit about it?
Well, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that was the same thing for me.
Right.
Is, I have a pretty decent IQ, but yet I found myself when I would read some of these teachings to reread them and try to really comprehend the gist of what was being said. And so I think it really has to do with level of consciousness. Being, again, my background in the corporate world,
right.
Teaching. I was a corporate trainer for a good number of years, and therefore I wanted to make it understandable for all different levels of consciousness and intelligence. They say sometimes you write at a sixth grade level. That's what my goal really was, is to take some of these teachings that can be very, very in-depth,
yes,
and simplify them so that, again, anybody could understand and then benefit from them. Because I think you're right. When we get on the spiritual path, it's really easy to get caught up in knowing more, reading more.
Absolutely.
And I hope I do a good job of driving home the point that it's really about, instead of reading another book right yet, practice some of these things and really start to implement them. And then the process takes on a life of its own. And you get to fasten your seatbelt and see where it goes.
Right. That's cool. One of the things I find really interesting about you is that corporate background. And we generally don't think of people in the corporate world of being spiritual, so to speak. But, I mean, certainly they want to be happy. But when you were in that world, like, you clearly got some kind of calling. And how did you get that? Like, what was that like for you to shift out of that world into this world that you're in?
Yes, it was all I can say, one word, Diksha. I ended up receiving Diksha in probably an unusual place. I went to a Tony Robbins seminar. I had resigned my position after my company went through a merger. And so I had been to a Tony Robbins seminar probably 12 years prior and done the Walk on Fire sort of experience. And so I thought, well, that might be something to help me do some soul searching and really figure out what the next step on the next chapter in my life is, really how I was thinking of it. So unsuspectingly, I received Diksha at this 6-day Tony Robbins seminar. He and his wife had become Diksha givers. She had benefited greatly with some health issues that she had. And so they shared it with, I think that they said there were 3,000 people in the room. It was all through intention, so no one even touched my head or anything. And I had a very, very profound, what I defined as a spiritual experience about 7 or 8 hours later. And it took me probably about 6 months to actually link that spiritual experience followed this Diksha experience, because it was all new to me, but it really did change the course of my life in ways that I never, ever could have imagined.
Wow, that's really cool. We talked about Diksha on the last program, but I'm guessing we probably have a few listeners who aren't familiar with that. So maybe, because it's had such a profound effect on you and myself as well, maybe you can talk just a little bit more about it. Yeah.
Yeah, the Oneness University is located in southern India, and it really has one goal, and it's really to help humanity awaken and help free us from our suffering and really move to a place where happiness becomes the experience. So Diksha is an energy transfer. Sometimes it's called oneness blessing. Diksha is the Sanskrit term, transfer of power or divine benediction, that has, again, one intention, and that is to elevate consciousness.
Beautiful. And you've actually gone to India several times, right?
Yes, I have been there 3 times. The first time, the process has changed a lot over the years. When I first attended, it was a 21-day process, and we were in silence. Most people who know me think that that's actually a mirror.
Might be difficult.
Yeah, a little bit difficult for me. I've always been a talker.
Yeah.
So, it was really personally impactful. But then on my 3rd trip, I went back and became a trainer to help them begin initiating. Now Diksha givers can do that here in Las Vegas or in their local market,
right.
And it's a 2-day process, very fast and easy. And if you're interested, please look at onenessuniversity.org, find someone in your area, attend a Diksha circle. We're looking for as many people as we can to help in this mission to help elevate consciousness on the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. That's kind of the collective dream of oneness, is that everyone experiences an awakening. We're actually going to do some Diksha at the end of the program, which I think will be really cool, not only for all of you, but for us as well. But let's get back to, so you had Diksha for the first time, and it sounds like it pretty much turned your life upside down, if not upside down, sideways.
Yes, and sideways and inside out and upside down. Yes, right. All different directions. Yeah. It really did. However, during my 2nd trip, I believe that's when I really started to get some clarity. And there is something really interesting in India that is, indescribable. I was not someone who was really familiar with energy work, other than the fact in the corporate world I knew that energy transmitted cell phone calls and things like that. I was in the wireless industry. Right. So this energy is, again, it's just changed my life, but it's a unique experience. Not everyone gets their life turned upside down. So if you're thinking, hey, I don't know if I really want that right now, you know what I mean? Yeah, most people describe that they feel calm and they sleep better. Those of us who I think had a participation in this, maybe it was a little bit stronger. I'm not really sure, but that was my experience.
Yeah, people do really experience it differently. So, today we're kind of focusing a little bit on this idea that we're all of us that walk this path are kind of waiting for the call. Like, is the doorbell going to ring? Am I going to get a phone call? What was that like? So you had the Diksha. It was like apparently a really profound experience. But how did you know then what your mission was here? Well, you started to write a book. You started this business. How did you figure all this out?
Well, I can't even really claim to say that I do have it figured out completely.
Yeah.
It's one of those things, like there's lots and lots of teachings, talking about, just keep taking the steps and the path will be revealed. Or, if you're driving from here to New York, you don't have to see the whole way. You only need to see the half a mile in front of you. And that's really how it sort of unfolded. And I have to tell you, even today, I still have moments of great uncertainty, and it is a bit challenging, because I have to say there is part of me, the human part, that really does want to know, all right, where are we going exactly?
Yeah, exactly.
So it's really just all unfolded. Even the book, it's just all unfolded one piece at a time. And I'm still not, like I said, fully clear on how it all looks, but I know I'm going in the right direction.
Well, that's a good thing. That's really awesome. Those of us in oneness know of this process called sitting with the what is.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what we do when we're in the midst of things and we don't really have clarity, and maybe we're even frustrated. So what does it look like, you think, for us to sit with the what is?
Well, I find it really interesting. During that 21-day process at the Oneness University, they gave a technique, I guess, if you will, that helps sit with it. And I've been back a couple of more times, and I haven't really heard it spoken that way again. But really, for me, it was about moving from the story to the physical body. Because if we understand that the story that we're telling ignites an energetic charge in us, an emotion. And so how do you sit with an emotion? Well, typically for most of us, we sit with it by telling ourselves the story over and over.
And other people as well.
And other
we
people.
We love to tell our story to everybody.
We love to commiserate.
Right?
Yeah, because maybe we can get some people telling us how right we
exactly.
are. And so anyway, it was really more about not listening to the story and really putting the focus on the body. And when I did that, then I can actually start to feel the energy. And I will tell you, anger, frustration, hurt, it's a completely different experience than the story. And I believe that that's what really the suffering is all about. Bhagwan says, to end suffering, suffer. Mm-hmm. Well, if you sit with the emotion and the energy, it really isn't, it's actually kind of an interesting experience. Right. I found, I'm like, wow, it's actually not that bad to feel angry this way when it wasn't attached to a story.
Right. That's a big leap for a lot of us, though, because many of us were brought up with that, that teaching of, hey, stop crying, forget about it, let it go, get on, be strong. And it sounds like you're really saying kind of the opposite, that we really need to feel these things quite deeply and in a very real way, and then we're able to release them. Is that?
Well, yeah, even, thank goodness, even the medical community is starting to see that, carrying some of these emotions like stress do end up eventually manifesting some sort of disease. And so that's the whole idea, is if we can actually let the energy out, then we're truly free. Then what I discovered, which was probably the most fascinating part of it, is that once that energy or the emotional attachment left, the story had no power. I could come back and tell myself the story, and then it became a humorous, something that I was giggling about that, 10 minutes earlier had me all, wound up.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a bit, you can feel that shift.
Absolutely.
When it just loses its charge.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. That makes sense to me. In talking about, I know a lot of us on the spiritual path, I keep going back to this because I think it's such an interesting idea that we're waiting to hear from God, our divine Mother Gaia, whoever is special, whoever is that one for us. We're waiting to get that clarity. And I keep going back to it because I talk to so many people who are so frustrated by that. So do you have any thoughts, like, for yourself, as you're sitting there waiting,
Right.
what can you do to encourage that? And also, how do we know the difference between when it's our mind
Right.
telling us, oh, this is what you should do,
Yeah.
versus some deep spiritual calling?
Well, for me personally, I think I had to come to terms with this. When I heard, we all have a purpose, I really expected it to be some grand, changing the world
Right.
on a global scale.
Right.
But when you really understand the concept of oneness, you're changing the world in every interaction that you have with another human being. So I think that that's probably one of the biggest things I had to overcome, and probably other people too.
Absolutely.
Because we hear purpose and we think it's got to be some really grand thing. But I don't know that it's really that. And once we really tap in and understand that our purpose is really about supporting, caring, relating, making a positive contribution, even within your personal relationships. Not something that's like you've got to go out and, write 1,000 books like
Right.
Deepak Chopra. I there was a period of time when I didn't think anybody was ever going to read my book except for the inmates here in Southern Nevada, through the prison work.
Right.
And that was really good enough for me. So although my mind, when you talk about that, the mind would come in and go, whoa, wait, that's not big enough. We've got to go bigger. So that, I think, is probably one of the ways that I identify the mind. When it's telling me that it should be something different than what it is in front of me,
Yes.
then that's the mind. If you wait for it, again, it doesn't matter what line of work you're in, and it doesn't necessarily mean that it's a professional calling.
Right.
In every profession, you can connect with your client, make eye contact with whoever you're dealing with, and just be present.
Yes.
That's a calling, I think.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you brought that up, because I think that's true. So many of us think we have to do something huge, to somehow meet our purpose and show that we are truly dedicated and committed. And it actually doesn't have to be huge at all, because everything really is huge. I mean, just showing up, and coming from a space of love and non-judgment and just being there for people, that's big enough for a lot of us.
Well, that's huge these days. I
Exactly.
mean,
Exactly.
let me just get back to you in a minute.
Right.
That's really easy. So I think it is huge.
Yes.
To walk in and actually connect with another human being without letting all of the other things that are running in the background take over.
Yeah, it's so true. And you really take that in, because I think we put so much pressure on ourselves, that we're supposed to do something just so amazing, and just being here and continually growing and upping your vibration is an amazing thing in and of itself. It truly is. You mentioned the prison. I know that you took your book to the prison. Talk a little bit more about that, because I just think that's really beautiful, really cool.
Well, this is a part of how it all unfolded. At first it was an idea in my head, and I again got the topic of happiness, because we're all looking for that. So again, it all just unfolded. I was doing a class here at a local hospital, and the director of all the prisons in Southern Nevada ended up in my class attending with his wife. He was one of two men, 25 women in the class. And afterwards, he actually approached me and talked about coming out and doing a presentation for his executive team, all of the wardens. And as we did that, I mentioned to him that I thought that we should maybe think about working with inmates. So again, it wasn't even a book then. It was just more of some concepts that I was sharing. And then I wrote it all up. I would print it out and 3-hole punch it and give it to each inmate who graduated. But I will tell you, that was such an amazing experience for me. At first I thought I was doing it for them.
Right.
And then somewhere along the way we realized that, it's the oneness. So we're doing it
Exactly.
for ourselves, and it helps everywhere. So yeah, it was an amazing experience. And you talk about emotions. If you can imagine, you talk about how we've all been taught to resist.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of these men in there have been taught to resist with some pretty
Oh, I
severe
would think.
consequences.
Yeah.
So, getting a bunch of inmates to talk about feelings was a really interesting experience. But I'll tell you what, the feedback that we got was just unbelievable. I couldn't have even anticipated that it would go that well. I mean, everything from, people saying that these teachings really help them in recovery from their addictions, in their relationships with other inmates, in their relationships with the corrections officers, even their family members outside. It was just a wonderful experience.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now, see, that's an interesting experience that you did, because how specific, right? We're all trying to figure out, who am I supposed to work with? Who can I help? What can I do? And you came up with this idea. So I go back again to that whole idea of calling and getting clarity. What made you know that you were supposed to work with this group?
Well, I guess I feel, my spiritual upbringing was a little bit all over the place. I mean, what can I say? I really didn't identify anywhere. So when I, got some more clarity, I always knew that I was going back to who I considered myself. The everyman is,
right.
Those of us who
That's
are working, moving through life,
Yeah.
who don't really have a lot of spiritual acumen. But how the inmate thing came up, it was really interesting. Exactly 14 days before the director ended up in my class, my mother and I were driving here in Las Vegas, and she saw this building up on the hill, and she said, "Hey, what's that building over there?" And I said, "I think that's a prison. I'm going to work with inmates." And I think I was almost as surprised that the words came out of my mouth.
They just kind of popped out,
yeah.
right? Yeah.
And my mom is so cute, she didn't miss a beat. She said, "Well, all right, well, don't start today."
Right.
She didn't want to be in the car, but anyway, so and then 14 days, like I said, now the old me in the corporate world, I would have set the goal, written down the action steps and called whoever I knew to network my way in. And really, it was so simple, and I think that that's probably it. If you start to pay attention to things, they'll all unfold in front of you. We don't, in fact, I use the title of Dr. Hawkins' book all the time. I don't know, I don't really necessarily recommend the book, but the title is brilliant. Power versus Force.
Yeah.
I really feel like that's the way I lived the first half of my life, through force.
Right.
And now that I'm sort of getting in the flow of power, it's a lot easier to pull things to you than to have to go out and make them happen.
Yes, absolutely. And that's another way to recognize a genuine, calling or voice of spirit. Like for you, you said it just kind of popped out and you didn't expect it.
Yeah.
If all of a sudden you're feeling called to do something that you never thought of, haven't planned, haven't been thinking about, that's really something to pay attention to, I think.
Well, back to the book, not that I'm really necessarily trying to promote it, but I think that in there I talk about the different voices, and another way that I can actually discern a little bit is it's usually a slower, calmer idea or assertion, the way the thoughts come through. Usually the hurried thoughts, no. Those kinds of things usually are coming from the mind, I've found. That's just another guide that I use. And quite frankly, the ideas, when they're coming from, the higher self or spirit, usually don't make a lot of sense to the mind.
Right.
In fact, it will say it very calmly and quietly, and then the mind will go, "What?
Exactly.
No way, we're not doing that." So.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Well, we're talking a little bit about the mind, so let's just follow that loop and talk about the brain. And you work with brain waves, which I just think is so awesome because, through meditation, that's what we're focusing on, is, experiencing different brainwave states, and you actually feel really different depending on how your brain is working at any given point. So, I experienced briefly with you. You put those electrodes on my head, and I actually noticed something pretty quickly. I'm just fascinated by this. You've helped people with depression and anxiety. Talk a little bit about this, because it's really neat.
Well, again, if you go back to considering who I believe my people are, or my audience, if you will, it's the everyman. And so a lot of them know that they have issues, but maybe they're not comfortable walking into a meditation group with incense and music from India. So this is really just another modality that has the same goal as most of the others, which is helping us release some of this suffering that we are all carrying mentally, emotionally, physically. And so again, it's got a little bit more of a science. I still call the business art of attunement, because there is a bit of an art. But the thing that I really like about it is that the brain is really in charge of the process. Meaning I'm not taking responsibility for doing anything to the brain. The way that I participate in the process would be, the best analogy I have is to say that I have different mirrors. I can hold up a full-length mirror for the brain to see what it's doing. Once it sees what it's doing, it adjusts itself back to balance. And I have magnifying mirrors. I have, things that we can focus on all the different areas of the brain to help it in the process. But again, I can't make a brain do anything. And that's why I love this process, because I firmly believe that the brain, and I tell every client this, I believe that your brain knows what it needs more than you, me, and quite possibly every neurologist on the planet put together. So it really does seem to help with lots of different things. People lose weight without effort. People sleep better. Depression, anxiety, pain, focus. I have people with ADD. I've had people say their IQ goes up. Just lots and lots of different benefits. And again, it's a little more comfortable for my audience than to initially walk in and say, hey, let me put my hands on your head, you'll feel better.
Exactly.
Although that is a funny side story. That's how the director of prisons introduced me to some people from the Department of Justice. He said, this is Angi. I don't know how she does it, but she puts her hands on my head and I feel better.
That's funny.
Anyway.
Yeah, so it sounds like what you're saying, we're kind of taking advantage of the idea that the body is self-healing.
Oh,
right?
Absolutely.
Which medicine doesn't usually take advantage of, unfortunately for us. So you're allowing the brain to see that the waves that it's producing are counterproductive.
Yes.
Would that be correct?
Yes. Well, again, to use a human example, let's say, you go use the restroom and your skirt gets caught up a little bit high on one side. You're walking throughout the day and you don't know it's lopsided and until you catch a reflection of yourself. Exactly. And then when you see it, you immediately adjust it. It's the exact same thing with the brain. It doesn't realize that it's operating out of balance because the brain has one goal, and that is to help this organism survive.
Right.
So if you encounter a trauma, if you survived, that was a success. Now, if that trauma left a little bit of an imbalance, the brain isn't concerned with that because it doesn't even really recognize that there's any issue. Again, it lived. Yay!
Right.
So
that's survival. Exactly.
Yeah, that's really all we're doing is showing the brain, and it balances itself. It's fascinating.
That is fascinating. So it sounds like when you have a trauma, that somehow that imprints itself on the brain and results in some brain waves that aren't particularly conducive to health, well-being, etc. And those stay?
Yeah. That is really exactly it. And here's how they explain it. that once you encounter a trauma, whether it's a physical trauma, whether it's an emotional trauma, and I'm talking, it doesn't have to be, we say the word trauma, and I think a lot of people think that that's like, they hear PTSD, you know,
Exactly.
It's somebody who's been in war, but...
It sounds like something horrible.
Yeah, right. Well, and unfortunately, sometimes they are, you know, even if you feel a betrayal from someone, that is a trauma. A surgery, a car accident, a fall, a bump, and not just to the head.
Right.
You know, you hurt your finger, you know, you're hammering a nail and you hit your finger. That is a trauma. When you encounter trauma, the brain operates differently to navigate that situation. Mm-hmm. You know, whether you need more blood there, whether you need, you know, whatever needs to happen, the brain is addressing that. Ideally, when the trauma is over, the brain would go back to balance.
Right.
Unfortunately, what they've discovered is that oftentimes it doesn't. And, you know, incidentally, one of the things that I find really interesting that, you know, where I believe that science and, you know, for a long time science and spirit went opposite.
And we're starting to
I start to see them come together because, you know, if you look at the spiritual path, a lot of teachings will talk about facing some of the, you know, same sort of situations over and over. Loss, let's say, for example,
right.
Someone who has a lot of loss in their life, you know, whether they lose them to death or you know, moving or leaving, a lot of separation in life. And that would be, you know, the soul's, potentially part of the soul's goal or mission here. When it comes to the brain, once the brain has suffered one particular kind of trauma, it becomes more susceptible to that again.
Oh, wow.
So, you know, if I could, I don't want to take too much time, but I'll give you an example. I had a client who was in the LA riots. I don't know if all of you remember those. And she was actually pulled from her car, and she suffered a severe traumatic brain injury, is what they call it, a TBI. And so when I was speaking with her on the phone before she came in, I automatically assumed that she was going to have physical trauma, right? Because that's what I expected to see in her brain.
Right.
But what I found completely surprised me. She had a propensity to loss. And I said to her, I said, you know, this is the strangest thing, because I know you went through physical trauma, but your brain is showing loss. And she said to me, you know, it's very interesting that you say that. She said, because I have forgiven the man that did this to me. I forgave him right away. She said, but I still, to this day, have not been able to fully forgive the people that stood by and watched. So when she told that story, it really made sense to me that, you know, even though she had a physical trauma, loss was really what she needed to, you know, face and walk through. So, and that was evidence in her brain activity and quite potentially her spiritual path.
Right. Very interesting. Yeah, so let's talk first a little bit about what it's like if someone comes in to have this experience with you. And then I'd like to touch on that whole spiritual path, how this brainwave thing could impact us spiritually. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. I get lots of that too.
Mm-hmm.
The process is very simple. We place sensors on your head at different spots, and we usually do, a session is made up of about 6 to 8 little mini meditations. They're about 8 to 10 minutes long, and we focus on each different part of the brain. The sensors that we place on your head are read-only. It's not shock therapy. People always ask, does it hurt? And what are you doing? We're only reading your brain activity. The computer program that we have translates your brain activity into musical tones. And we play it back to you in headphones. Mm-hmm. So I turn down the lights. We have a zero gravity recliner, let you tilt back, relax. And you're listening to music, but not just a pre-recorded track of music, but music that is a real-time representation of your brain's activity, and it uses those tones like we use a mirror. Mm-hmm. And that's really, it's a really simple process, but again, I still, you know, I've been doing this 6 years, and I still think, how does this work? Yeah. The brain is so fascinating that it can actually understand that that music is a mirror for it.
No, it really is.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And I imagine it's kind of like fingerprints, that everyone's brain has its own music. I mean, everyone sounds different, right?
Everyone is completely unique. So the tones you hear will not be the tones that I hear.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So, yeah, the spiritual path thing. You know, I think you can almost get scared hearing about this, right? Because I walk out and I stub my toe, and then my brain, you know, has this little trauma, and you know, of course, my brain's asking right now, will I need to work on my brain every time I have a trauma, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
So
right.
that's that could, you know, bring some fear up in people.
Sure.
But the other thing I'm interested in specifically is how this impacts us spiritually. So if we, you know, let's say you've had a lot of traumas and you haven't, you know, they're still going through in the brainwaves, how can that impact you on your spiritual journey?
Right. Okay, a couple of great questions there. With regard to, you know, again, I believe that, you know, my target or my audience is really the everyman. However, I have a connection with a lot of folks who are on the spiritual path.
Exactly.
So I've had a lot of them in my chair too.
Mm-hmm.
Again, the great thing I like about the modality is that they, you know, can do a little bit of both. So, I've had some of those folks who are really spiritually connected who tell me that this actually helps them get places they've never gotten before. For the everyman, they leave with an ability to meditate. The thoughts slow a little bit, so by the time we are done working together, they're able to meditate and really at least get in that space.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, because a lot of people do really struggle with meditation and getting, you know, it quiet enough up there. And I'm guessing that this would certainly help with some of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very nice. Well, we are getting towards the end, and we have a few more things that we want to do. Yeah, and some of you know, excuse me, that I'm actually leaving for India in a week. So we've had all this talk about Oneness and Oneness University, and I had my calling several months ago when I realized that I was called to India to go through what's called a 28-day deepening process. And I am excited, fearful, apprehensive, ecstatic. I could probably, you know, go on forever about this trip. But what I'm really excited about is for having this experience and then bringing it back and being able to share with people and hopefully help people more, you know, along their spiritual journeys. So I will be gone for a month and do have another program scheduled for January 28th at 12:13. So I just wanted to share that with all of you. We talked about we're going to give you Diksha today, and Angi is a Diksha giver. I am one. And Michelle, who runs this beautiful radio station, is going to be giving Diksha as well. So what we want to do is I'm just ending with you now so that as we, you know, I'll quietly say namaste, goodbye after the Diksha, and then you can just kind of stay in that space and really enjoy it. Because Diksha kind of opens you up to this beautiful, calm feeling of peace and love, and I just want you to be able to enjoy that for a while. So we're going to start with some breath awareness, really kind of a little mini meditation, and then if your eyes are open, you'll notice that Angi and I will both put our hands up. What we're doing is, because we can't touch your heads, we're giving intention Diksha. Our intention will be for you that you experience awakening to your natural self and that you have a full realization of whatever is your divine, you know, whether that be Buddha, Jesus, God, Mother Gaia, you know, whatever that is for you. So let's just get relaxed. If you are sitting, you want to put your feet on the floor. You don't want your legs crossed. And put your hands however it's comfortable for you. And just close your eyes. You know, become aware of your body and just start watching your breath as it goes in. Follow it down your trunk to your abdomen. And then as you let your breath out, follow that breath as it travels breathing in and out, take a moment just to focus on your heart space. This is where, where it all begins. That's where we feel love, where we feel connection. And when we're grateful for anything, you can almost automatically feel that heart just start to open up. So focus on your heart area a little bit. And if it feels tight, just think of some things that you're grateful for, and you'll notice that start to loosen up a little bit. And now let's just focus on our arms. Roll the wrists around a little bit, roll the shoulders around. Move your arms around to release any tension. And then just let them rest in your lap. Now we're going to start with the intention diksha, and I just want you to stay connected to your body, to your heart, and keep watching your breath.